Who is this Mao Zedong that everybody keeps on talking about? Who is this? Robbie Unson wrote this book called Mao Zedong, Mao Zedong. I think it's Mao Zedong, the man who conquered China. Mao Zedong, the man who conquered China. When President Richard M. Nixon announced in the summer of 1971 that he was going to go to China to visit with that country's leaders, Mao Zedong and Chow En-lai, a 22-year-old college student in Santa Monica, California, declared, "I started it all. I started it all." And in a way, that 20-year-old college student from Santa Monica, California, he did start it all. During the World Table Tennis Championships at Nagoya, Japan, Glenn Cowan stood out in dress, if not in the mastery of the game. The Chinese won all the trophies. Table tennis, or Ping-Pong as it is sometimes called in the United States, is the national pastime of China. This is called the ping that started it all. Nothing is insolvable, but if we understand the problem, we can master the way. It's a quote by Mao Zedong. Decide one day to pay homage to the visitors. The flamboyant young Glenn Cowan, wrapped a t-shirt in a gift basket, or in a gift package. His long hair bouncing to his shoulders and his bell-bottom trousers flapping about his white shoes, he entered the camp of the Chinese team and asked to see their champion. Glenn Cowan presented the winner with a white cotton t-shirt on which was emblazoned seven blue stripes with the white peace sign, an inverted three-pronged fork in a red field. Across the stomach was printed the saying of the now generation, "Let it be. Let it be, let it be." It's the Beatles. I want to hold your hand. The American youth stayed for tea, spent a pleasant afternoon talking through interpreters, and returned to the American team with an account of his incredible experience. It was a groove, he concluded. The following day, the Chinese champion visited Cowan and presented him with a gift, creating almost as much excitement among members of the United States team as if they had won the tournament. Before this, there had been hints that the Chinese would welcome a visit by the American team to Peking, along with the players from Canada, England, Nigeria, and Colombia, because the national table tennis federations of those countries had voted to invite the teams from mainland China to participate in the World Championships. But the official invitations from Peking came shortly after Cowan's visit. Glenn Cowan's visit, leading the colorful Glenn Cowan, the Californian, to take the credit. Glenn Cowan certainly set the mood of friendliness and good fellowship, declared John Roderick, Associated Press correspondent, who, along with John Rich and Jack Reynolds of NBC, accompanied the American players to China. And then we're going to go on and just kind of talk about the geopolitical situation of the whole thing. I want to talk more about Mao Zedong. He was born December 26th, the day after Christmas in 1893. So that he's old as heck, right? 707 plus 22, 129. If he lived today, Mao Zedong would be 127. In the village of Shaoshan in the Hunan province. Hunan beef, that's like the best damn beef in the world, is it not? Hunan beef, located in central China, inland some 400 miles from the China Sea, 800 miles south of Peking. The area is especially beautiful. There's a fine navigable river, the Xiang, and the shimmering lakes and shaded beaches, dominated to the north by rugged tree-studded cliffs. We'll get back to that, but first I want to read Richard Nixon's interpretation of the ping-pong diplomacy. Essentially, there was all these sanctions, and there was this Cold War between America and China, and then for whatever reason, probably politics, right? To look at what I did. Nixon says, I hope that people don't just say, oh, Nixon was just about Watergate and opening up the door to China. Nixon, if anybody remembers anything about you, but those are the two things. He was like, that's all people know is Watergate and the Mao Zedong meeting. That's all they know. So I'm actually just going to read it, and that is not where I need to read. Is it here? No, that's about George McGovern. Is it this one? It has to be, right? Yep, here we go. So this is Richard Nixon, the presidency, 1972. I see 1971. It's under the chapter 72. But for some reason, we're still February 25th, 1971. 5 days after this tirade was published, some tirade, I submitted to Congress my second foreign policy report. That's actually, I'm just reading the paragraph above it. So give me, this time a second, dealing with the People's Republic of China, canvassed the possibilities for an expanded relationship between our nations and reflected the eventuality of Peking's admission to the United Nations. It concluded, in the coming year, I will carefully examine what further steps we might take to create broader opportunities for contacts between the Chinese and American peoples and how we might remove needless obstacles to the realization of these opportunities we hope for, but will not be deterred by a lack of reciprocity. We should, however, be totally realistic about the prospects. The People's Republic of China continues to convey to its own people and to the world its determination to cast us in the devil's role. Our modest efforts to prove otherwise have not reduced Peking's doctrinaire enmity toward us. So long as Peking continues to be adamant for hostility, there is little we can do by ourselves to improve the relationship. What we can do, we will. On March 15th, the State Department announced the termination of all restrictions on the use of American passports for travel to mainland China. On April 6th, a breakthrough occurred in a totally unexpected way. We received word from the American Embassy in Tokyo that an American table tennis team competing in the World Championships in Japan had been invited to visit the PRC in order to play several exhibition matches. I was as surprised as I was pleased by this news. I had never expected that the China initiative would come to fruition in the form of a ping-pong team. We immediately approved the acceptance of the invitation, and the Chinese responded by granting visas to several Western newsmen to cover the team's tour. On April 14th, I announced the termination of the 20-year-old embargo on trade between us. I also ordered a series of new steps taken for easing currency and shipping controls applying to the PRC. The same day, Chow En-lai personally welcomed our table tennis players in Peking. When I spoke to the convention of the American Society of Newspaper Editors in Washington a few days later, I was asked about the meaning of the recent events involving the PRC. I replied that we were seeing an ordered policy process beginning to bear fruit. I said that I would have to disappoint the editors if they were looking for hot headline news, but the very nature of the new relationship made that impossible. I concluded with an observation that I am sure many of my listeners dismissed as simply a personal digression. In fact, it was a direct clue. The other day was Easter Sunday. I began. Both of my daughters, Tricia and Julie, were there. And Tricia with Eddie Cox, I understand they are getting married this June, and Julie and David Eisenhower. And the conversation got around to travel, and also, of course, with regard to honeymoon travel and the rest, they were asking me, where would you like to go?